As a South African, the South African government has subbed out their foreign policy to Iran. The current South African foreign minister, Naledi Pandor, is an Islamist.
Oh,
They have become the legal arm of Hamas.
wow.
Approximately 1 million South Africans have died or been killed through increasing poverty in South Africa. The South African government is on the cusp of being declared a failed state, and this is a means of distracting the population
Wow.
from their own domestic problems to ally themselves with nefarious actors such as Iran, North Korea, Venezuela. South Africa's allied itself with Russia. They've taken every human rights position that is antithetical towards human rights, and to try and virtue signal to say that they are on the side of Hamas, ISIS, Boko Haram, the South African people who are oftentimes victims of Islamist activity and terrorism on the continent of Africa should take note that the ANC government has allied themselves firmly with those entities who stand against black Christian Africans. The South African community should take notice of the current government that they have.
Where does Marxism and communism fit into the picture?
A bunch of the South African leaders are firmly on the Leninist-Stalinist ideology. They acknowledge that is their ideology. They stand with terrorist groups who call themselves liberation movements. They excruciatingly select individual words by Mr. Mandela to give themselves legitimacy. They dispense with his other words or the full context of his speeches. It is excruciating propaganda to use the last legitimacy of the South African state in order for a Hamas agenda.
What's your concern about the allegations of genocide towards Israel that were leveled by the South African government and International Criminal Court?
The allegations of genocide against Israel are a simple absurdity. It is the most offensive Holocaust inversion that they could possibly construct. There is no indication or there is no intent of genocide by Israel whatsoever. It is a slander, it's a canard, and the South African government have set themselves against European and American governments, and European and American governments should take note of who South Africa has allied themselves with, what their positions have become, and America and Europe need to re-evaluate their current ties with South Africa, because South Africa is not a legitimate or well-functioning state anymore.
Do you have any perspective on the Jewish liberals, who helped the ANC rise to power, and now are being victimized by the ANC's anti-Zionist, you could say anti-Semitic policies?
My own family was involved in the liberation struggle. I was arrested by the apartheid regime 3 times. My aunt was in the cell next to Mr. Mandela. My uncle was tortured to death by the apartheid regime. The Jewish community stood almost in lockstep with the black community. Jews were 2% of the white population in South Africa, yet they were 50% of the whites involved in the liberation struggle in South Africa. The Jews have been utterly betrayed by the South African regime. The utter loyalty, human rights, dignity by Jews in solidarity with black Africans has been inverted with an utter betrayal. The Jews who are standing against with anti-Zionists and Jew haters, I can only imagine that they either suffer from some level of mental illness or of virtue signaling, because the legitimacy of their positions is close to zero.
Where are you talking? Are you referring to South Africa or North America?
All of the above. Anti-Zionist Jews are simply anti-Semitic Jews. It's happened in every segment of society. There are self-hating gay people, there are self-hating black people, and there are self-hating Jews. And the anti-Zionist Jews cannot claim to be Jews. They are simply anti every position that Jews believe in.
Do you think that they're being exploited through their naivete?
I'm not sure they're naive. I think some of these people are incredibly brilliant. I can't explain their nefarious positions, their absolute distortions, their propaganda. For the young people, I think it's some form of rebellion against their own parents or against their society, as teenagers tend to rebel, and this is the harshest form of rebellion. I hope they grow out of it. I hold anti-Zionists in utter contempt as a lifelong human rights activist, who's paid very dearly for my own human rights activism. I hold these anti-Zionists in utter contempt and disdain. Their positions are uninformed. Their positions, I think, are evil and disgusting.